Good morning, good afternoon everyone, and a very warm welcome to the RF IDeas and MyQ webinar, which we're covering credentials and configurations for deployment in secure print. I'm Ian Bailey in London today, and I'm Sales Director for EMEA. Joining me from Chicago and presenting today is Jeff Olson, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer at RF IDeas. Hi Jeff.
Good afternoon, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Great, and joining us, I'm delighted to have Petr Hacmac, who's the CTO, Chief Technical Officer at MyQ over in Prague. Morning, good afternoon, Petr.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. And also presenting today will be Michal, Deml, who's Pre-Sales Manager for MyQ, together with Petr in Prague. So good afternoon, Michal.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today for the webinar. In terms of housekeeping, everyone is on mute for the comfort of the attendees. But you're welcome to ask questions at the end. We'll have a Q&A session, and you can raise your hand for those questions, and we will unmute you. You can ask the question and direct it to myself, or to Jeff, or to Petr, or to Michal, and we'll do our best to answer that. Alternatively, as we're going through the presentation, feel free to type in your question in the chat. We can capture that, and then we can we'll ask that question on your behalf at the end and endeavor to answer it also. So that's the housekeeping, and without further ado, let me hand over to Jeff. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Ian. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to go through some items. First off, we'll have Michal go over how the RF IDeas solution integrates with the MyQ print solution. We'll do an overview of credentials, both the 125 kilohertz and 13.56 megahertz credentials, different form factors. We'll look at the configuration utility. We'll spend a lot of time with the configuration utility, features of the configuration utility, and in the configuration utility we have the card analyzer. I'll be going through the card analyzer and how you can utilize that as a tool to configure, learn the card technology, okay, how to configure the reader and learn the card technology. So with that, I will let Michal will move forward and talk about the MyQ solution.
Thank you, Jeff. So, as a start, I would like to point out a few authentication methods which are now available in MyQ. As you can see, the first one here is the very simple one. As simple as the PIN code, which could be numerical or alphanumerical. It could be automatically generated or imported through different databases. The other option is that the users can use a username and password. That could go, again, from our own database, or can be synchronized from external sources like Active Directory, OpenLDAP, and other ones. You can also use the radius for the authentication. Now, while I'm mentioning those two, there are two possible, how to call it, disadvantages of those two. For example, when talking about a PIN code, the PIN code could be a little bit unsecure for high security environments. On the other hand, the username and password could be a little bit tricky when you have to insert it on the panel of the machine. So the third option I would like to introduce today are the ID cards, the main topic we are now focusing on. There's maybe one more little remark that in a case the customer will need something like a high security environment, we can also offer two-factor authentication. Means the customer would have to first present the ID card to be able to either insert PIN or the password. Now, I would like to focus on the next slide, which will be about the card reader compatibility in MyQ. The first thing when we are picking up a card or thinking about a card authentication is what card reader is suitable for my printer. So the first thing we have to focus on is the actual connector which is available at the machine. As an example, we've got here the standard USB-2, which will be, for example, for the Kyocera, Toshiba, and this kind of machines, and the USB Mini-B connector, which has to be used on the HP or Ricoh Smart SDK devices. To be able to connect the reader and work with MyQ, the most important thing is the card reader has to be set into keyboard emulation so we can actually catch the pen and work with it. Another important thing is, as you can see, the third point, the vendor ID and product ID of the card reader. Without it, we will not be able to work with the actual reader. These two ID numbers are either part of the firmware of the machine, so the machine has to support it, or we can do it through the embedded. The good message for all the attendees is that all the embeddeds we are offering already support all the PC Prox readers, so there's no problem about that. Another thing about picking up the card is where would you like to connect it? As you can see here on the pictures, there are two possible options of how to get the card reader connected. The first one is at the top, that you've got a card reader attached to the side of the machine, which goes to its back via USB cable directly connected. The other option is on a big picture, which is a reader which is actually integrated into the panel of the machine, as you can see on the HP device below. Now, something about the card reader technologies we can offer, or RFID can offer together with us. We have to think what card reader we would like to use. If the single technology is enough, that way it will be just single technology reader. In a case the customer is using multiple technologies like the HID or MyFair, or multiple different cards, we can also use the multi-technology card reader, and together with PC Prox readers we can offer up to 4 technologies used simultaneously. Yeah, maybe one more important remark. If the customer has a special need to use NFC technology or low energy Bluetooth, in that case a special application must be installed on the either mobile or the tablet, which is used for the authentication, and it's really important to ensure that that mobile device will always emit the right identical number, which will be unique per device. Now, as a next thing, I would like to focus on the card number management, starting with the simple setup. So basically, in this slide, I would like to speak about the options of how to get the cards into the system and allow the user to authenticate through the card. The first simple option is, as you can also see on the video on the right top corner, is simply to get the card reader to the machine, distribute the pins to the users, so the user can use a one-time pin to log in, and then simply just press a button to register a card, swap the card over the reader, and it's done. The thing about this is a very easy solution that fits everyone. No additional modifications are needed, because basically what the card reader will read, we'll put it in a database, and from that moment you can easily start using that card for authentication. The other option, which is the second main point, is that in a case your customer already has some kind of a database where all the cards are already stored. In such a case, it may happen that because they have obtained those numbers either through different readers or from different software, it could be slightly different from what we get when you actually swipe the card over the reader. As you can see, as a little example is, we can have the card, for example, here in hexadecimal, but in database is in decimal format. So what we can do, we can prepare a special transformation of the number to make sure it fits the actual number which is in the database. There are, let's say, 2 or 3 ways how to make that happen. The first one is we can do it as a general solution in the MyQ. So as you can see on the picture below the video, we can provide certain specific codes that will do the thing that will, for example, change it like here from the hexadecimal to decimal, trim certain bytes, modify it. There are plenty of things we can do with a number to make it match. Another option is that we can do it through the configuration utility, which I think Jeff will definitely cover a little bit later. In some cases, of course, those two options means MyQ and the actual configuration of the card are needed to achieve the expected result. There's a third possible thing, and that's for very special cases. The customer is using their own proprietary format. In such a case, it has to be set through the configuration utility. But of course, to be able to work with the card, we will need some, how to say it, a permission and assistance from the actual provider of that technology or the proprietary format. Now, I believe Jeff will cover the configuration utility later in the presentation, so I now would like to hand over to him.
Thank you, Michal. So we're going to look at the Wave ID solution here, and Michal pretty much covered it, talking about the reader and how it fits into the MyQ, how it fits into the MyQ solution. Okay, really there's 4 pieces to the solution: the employee smart card, the employee badge, the reader, okay, the MyQ software solution, print solution, and the MFP hardware. Right, so that's the solution that we're providing. Let's take a look at the different card types, different form factors, credential types that you're going to see, potentially see in the field. You probably have seen them out in the field. You'll see cards that have magnetic stripes on them. You're going to see a multitude of different cards. Magnetic stripe cards. The PC Prox Plus reader that we have today does not read magnetic stripe, but you will see that. Okay, you will run into that. So you just want to be aware that we're using contactless 125, 13.56 megahertz cards, contactless. You may see magnetic stripe technology on the card. Okay, so be aware of that. You'll see cards with barcodes. Okay, you'll see cards with barcodes. Again, these can be multi-technologies, right? These I've seen cards with barcodes and magnetic stripe and contactless technology. Okay, and then the radio frequency cards, the RF cards that we do support and use today. Okay, magnetic stripe and barcode, we'll say are older technologies, right? Magnetic stripe being one of the first technologies, and then the barcodes, and then we're getting into the contactless or proximity radio frequency cards. Okay, so those are the different technologies, and then we talk about the form factors. We have different form factors. You'll have the adhesive tags. Okay, adhesive tags, and these tags might go on a non radio frequency card. So a card that does not have radio frequency technology. Maybe it is just a mag stripe card, or maybe it is just a barcode card, or maybe it's just a PVC card as an identification card. These adhesive tags come in both 125 and 13.56 megahertz. So even though the customer may not have a card with wireless technology, you can turn that card into, to a card that has contactless technology. Key fobs, they come in smaller form factors, a key fob, and you'll see these in both 125 again and 13.56. And I will mention that really with all these credentials, with all these different form factors, you will see these in both frequency ranges. Okay, adjustable watch, wristband, clamshells. Typically, today you see what we'll call the ISO card. It's a very thin card, much like your credit card. The clamshells are a much heavier card, older card, more durable. I'll say they are quite a bit more durable. I would say not as used as much today. I think everybody's used to that credit card ISO form factor, that thin card. We look at the PVC card, the printable PVC card that I mentioned, where it's just maybe used for an ID. We're printing a picture on the card. And then some other adhesive labels, again, both in the 125 and 13.56 megahertz. Frequency ranges, again, for those applications where the card doesn't have any RF technology, any wireless technology, you can easily adhere a label, or if it has a technology that isn't supported. And then, of course, last, card emulation. Certain phones, most phones today have an application built in that you can enable for card emulation, and what that's doing, it's emulating a smart card. So it's actually outputting the CSN UID of a smart card. Okay, and that is a little bit different from, we'll say, Bluetooth or maybe using your Bluetooth or NFC technology, where maybe you're sending more data. Okay. Some of the different card technologies that we support, both low frequency and high frequency. So on the low frequency, you'll see many different card types. We'll call those proximity cards. Okay. On the right column, you'll see the 13.56 megahertz smart cards. The PC Plus reader is reading the UID or CSN from those smart cards. So it's not by default reading from that memory, which we'll look at in just a few minutes. Okay, so these are the sampling of the many different card technologies that the PC Plus reader that you'll be using supports. Okay. Let's take a look inside the card. What's inside this white plastic piece of that we have? Okay. Here we're showing a multi-technology, dual technology card. Okay, so here we're seeing 2 antennas and a contact chip. Okay, so this card also has a contact chip. PC Plus reader does not support a contact chip. We only deal with the contactless portion of the card. Okay, so in a multi-technology card, again, you'll have a 125, it's showing, and a 13.56. Again, the card could have only a 13.56 antenna or coil, or a 125 kilohertz antenna or coil. Okay. One thing you will notice with a multi-technology card versus a single technology card, that the read range may be decreased. Okay, the more technologies on the card, the more metal, the more antennas, you'll find that the range will decrease. Okay, so I want you to be aware of that, where maybe you have one card that's reading fine. You can be centimeters away and it will work fine. In other cases, you have to present the card to the reader in order for it to read. That can be the case because of these multi-technologies in the card. Okay, so just be aware of that. One thing I will mention while we're here, when you're working with a card that's multi-technology, when you're configuring the reader, you want to configure the reader to only read one of the technologies. So you either want to read the 13.56 technology or the 125. Okay, very important that you're not reading both technologies. Of course, what will happen is data from either or of the technologies will be displayed. So you'll probably end up with 2 different IDs in your database for that one particular user. Okay, so I want you to be aware of that. External markings on the card. Here's an example of an HID I-class high frequency card. Okay, it's very good to get used to looking at markings on cards. I know many cards that are in the field have no markings. Again, they're plain white cards, very difficult to analyze. Okay, HID does a very good job of giving us a lot of information. Here, since we have it, of course, it's showing us it's an HID I-class card. Okay, this is something that's very helpful too. It's telling us that it has this P16K. P is telling us that this is a multi-technology. It has 125 kilohertz procs, okay? Here it's telling us also the memory size of the card, how much memory, which I'll show you here in another slide. And it shows us the ID number of both the low frequency 125, 13.56 megahertz, and this is a sales order or job number. We work with customers every day, and the end user might say, oh, we want to print the number, we want to output the number that's printed on the card, and they give us this particular number, this job number or sales order number. That's not embedded on the card, so that's just used that identifies that batch of cards. So this would be the ID number that we would try to output from the reader, and in some cases the printed number does not match what's embedded on the card, so they'll make it a non-matching. It's offset by, we'll say, 10,000. Okay, so just be aware of that. 125 proximity has been around for a very long time, right? Probably after MagStripe, the 125 came out. It's been out there for years. It's not secure. It is proprietary, so you'll see that there are many. If you haven't seen it already, there are many different 125 kilohertz proximity cards out today. They're all proprietary. Okay, unlike the smart card technology where they've come up with a standard. Proximity cards are proprietary. They may be on the same frequency, but their modulation schemes are a little bit different. They talk a little bit different. Okay, so if it's an HID proximity card versus an Andala versus a Cassie Rusco versus an EM125 card, they're all different, same frequency, but they're all proprietary. You can't use a single frequency reader for multiple card types. Hence the PC Prox Plus, where you're able to configure the reader for these different card types that are out there. I want to show you this briefly. This is called a lot of different things. This raw data. Here we're showing parity bits, facility code, and ID that are normally fields within the proximity card data. This raw data, the different names for this raw data: PAX data, physical as control bits. This is the raw, what I'll refer to, and if you talk to any of our tech support staff, raw data from the card. Okay, this is very important. Raw data from the card. These are all the bits, and we'll refer to these bits. Okay, so just keep that in mind going forward. And based on that previous slide, there are many different card formats. So you saw the facility code and the ID bits in the previous slide here. Again, you're seeing facility code and ID. Many different formats. HID alone has thousands of formats. What is a format? Okay, what's meant by the format? It's a grouping of bits. So this grouping is a format. Okay, so raw data from the card, PAX data, facility code, ID bits make up the format. And again, there are many different formats. And as we get into the config utility and you're configuring your readers to output the card data, you may be asking the customer for their format. What is your format? Or so in configuring the reader, you can configure the reader to output particular ID code, okay? Or you could configure the reader just to read the raw data or the PAX, which is totally acceptable because you're going to get a unique number for that user. So I know a lot of times it's driven by the customer. They want to output that number that's printed on the card a lot of times. Other times, we don't have to worry about that. We can output raw data. Okay, so some things to think about there. But there are many different formats. Here we're looking at two 37-bit formats. One that has a a 35-bit. These are happens to be 35-bit for the ID. This has a 19-bit ID with a 16-bit facility code. Okay, two 37-bit formats, card formats, but they're different. Okay, two different formats. So I would have to configure the reader differently to output the number for each of these cards. Okay, they're the same but they're different. So in this case, this is where outputting from the reader the raw data from the card may be, it may be a good thing. It's easier. I will show you with the config utility how we can make actually getting this ID code easier. So generating the number that the customer wants and make it easy. 13.56 megahertz contactless smart card. Okay, what's in a smart card? We looked at that HID I-class card earlier. Okay, really some different areas of the card. Okay, the chip contains a CSN or UID. People will call it different things. This UID or CSN is embedded to the chip when it's manufactured. Okay, so it is a non-duplicating number. It's not duplicated anywhere. You can use it as an unsecured ID. Okay. Also in the smart card is a memory area. Okay, there's an area of memory that we'll take a look at a little closer. We'll go through a few slides and just showing you the different structures of different smart cards. Okay, but these areas can be secured by a particular reader manufacturer. Here we're showing actually an HID I-class, and they actually secure one area of memory to emulate the proximity card. There are other manufacturers that do the same thing. So their readers, their door readers, will read that particular area. Then there's another really an open part of memory that can be still utilized for companies to write data to the card. Universities may write a student ID. Large corporations may write the employee number to these areas of the card. Okay, different cards, HID, HID I-class, SE, the CS cards, MyFair. Of course, we have MyFair Logic or MyFair Classic. We have Desfire, Ultralight, and then you get into the Logic cards. Okay, Avant and Prime cards. Okay, so be aware that there are multiple areas of a smart card that can be potentially read, and it's important to know what you need to read from that. In most cases, again, the UID or serial number is adequate. Occasionally, you'll find that the customer needs to read from this memory location of the card. Contact MyQ RF IDeas for assistance on that one. And these next few slides, I'm gonna run through. I just wanted to show you really the different memory. I'll call them memory maps. Every manufacturer has they call them different things. Okay, HID I-class has application areas and pages. Okay, they come in different sizes. Okay, that was a 2K. Here we have a 16K. Again, application areas and pages. MyFair Classic card. Okay, we have sectors and blocks. Okay, we still have, it's still memory, but they're calling it different things. And I just want you to be aware that really the memory of these different from these different manufacturers are called different things. Just so we get into the habit of using correct terminology. The classic card comes in different memory sizes also. Okay, so be aware of that. Desfire, of course, they have a file system. So you're working with not sectors and blocks, but you're working with the application ID and files. Okay. Analyzing the card, and this goes to maybe when you're going into the customer for the first time, and you're trying to get information, because the card is probably the least of what you're thinking about in providing the solution to the customer, but it's that last piece that comes back, and for some reason we didn't talk about the card, and we don't know what the card is. So some things to just keep in mind. You know, if you don't have the PC Prox reader and the config utility with you at the time you're talking to the customer, when you're talking to the customer and they're using cards and they want to use the card for the solution, try to get as much information about the card as possible, right? Cards only come in boxes, so any information, take a snapshot of the card box label or the bag label, screenshot of the card, which will help you or us identify what technology they're using. If the customer is using a smart card and they want to read from the memory of the card, they've written data, right? They've written that employee number or that student ID to the card. Just some different, you know, try to get that information from them, and we do have a sheet that you can fill in that will have that you can put that data into. Okay, so that helps us later on configuring the card reader. Okay, so HIDI class, of course, the keys, what page or application areas the data is written to, right? In each case, it's important to know where the data is in the smart card. Okay, so as much information about that smart card as possible, where that data is at, is helpful later on. Okay, so be aware of that. The configuration utility, as Michal said, you have a couple different options of configuration. There is the ability of doing some manipulation of the data within the print solution. The configuration utility is the other option. That's downloaded from our website. Okay, and always try to maybe go in and look when using the config utility. If you have our configuration utility now, maybe go in and take a look and make sure you have the latest version. This slide shows 5.2.4. I believe we're at 5.2.33, so we're up a couple versions right now. So let's take a look. What I'm going to do first is let's take a look at the card analyzer, and then I'm going to show you our cloning feature. So first, the card analyzer to determine what card we're using. I think what I'll do then is I will configure the reader for that particular card type, and then what we'll do is we'll take that and use that to clone. So another feature of the utility. So if you have a deployment and you need to configure multiple readers, and I'll go through and we'll take a look at how we can configure multiple readers at a time. Okay. So let's go ahead and connect to our reader. Okay. The card analyzer that we're going to be using is used with our PC Prox Plus readers. Okay, so if you have a PC Prox Plus, it will connect. Using the config utility, you'll see connect, disconnect, to write active. These are three important buttons. Connect and write active being the most important, of course. When we connect to a reader, you will see the model number displayed. Okay, and the firmware version and your vid and PID of the reader that you're using. Currently, we're using a USB reader. Okay. I'm going to go into some other features of the utility here in a few minutes, but let's go into the card analyzer feature of the utility, and let's take a look at a card. So the first tab is the Learn. What we're going to do is we're going to learn the card. Okay, so we're going to go into the Learn tab, and this is going to go in and we're going to analyze the card. And it should show us if it's a compatible card type, it should show us the card type or types and the supporting readers, and it'll give us some added information. So what we'll do is we'll place the card On the reader, we'll click the Start Scan button. It says, please put a card on the reader. Okay. And now it's going to go through the scanning process. Okay, so now we're interrogating the card. We're looking at the card to see if it's supported. It is. It comes back with multiple card types. Okay, so the PC Prox Plus reader, you'll see these different card types listed. The underlying, and this is, I'll say this because I know it, the underlying technology for all these different card types is EM. EM technology is the underlying card types. In our configuration utility, we listed the actual names of the manufacturers for customer convenience. So they may know their card as a Deister card or a Digitag card or a Rossler card, but the underlying technology is all EM. Okay, so just be aware of that. You'll see that if you scan a MyFair card and you know it's a MyFair Classic card, it will come back as MyFair Ultralight. It's reading the CSN from that technology, and it's coming back. The underlying technology is the same. Okay, it's an ISO 14443. It's the same. So here we're listing the different card types. Okay, so it's great. We know that it's compatible technology. It shows us the supporting readers in 805 or in 800. Okay, it's giving us the raw data bits from the card. Okay, it's showing us that this is a, for this it's 44 bits. If we go in, and this is again based on our configuration, you'll see this changes somewhat based on the configuration. Okay, so we'll select one. We'll go to auto config. What does auto config do? So what we could do here, the part of the feature of the card analyzer, not only determining the card technology, but we can also use it to configure the reader for the card type. So if we wanted to create, we can create a configuration file and take that file, save it, maybe archive it for a later date. We could use it to configure other readers. Okay, so you'll see that there's a card number displayed, and that's again based on the default configuration of the analyzer, and it changes based on the default configuration for these card types in the analyzer. And we're not going to be concerned with that right now, because as you go through, the idea was, right, that we're trying to output certain data from the card. Whenever I click through these technologies, I do not see the number. In the case I don't see the number that I want output. Okay, so if it was here, okay, if this was the number, I could say, okay, I want to put that in configuration 4. And I could write that, and it would write the configuration to the reader, and I'd be done. Okay, I could also then save that HWG file. I could save a configuration file if I was done. Okay, in this case, I'm going to say I'm not done. None of these numbers match the number on my card. So I'm trying to output the number that's printed on my card. We can then go to the Analyze. Okay, we'll go to the Analyze tab. And here we can put in the values that I'm looking for. Okay, so I can leave it at Deister UID, and I'll type in the number that's printed on this card. This is the number. Okay, so what's going to do is I'm going to go in and analyze, and it found the number. So it went in, it looked at those zeros and ones that we looked at earlier, that raw data, and tried to find this card ID, this number in that raw data, and it found it. Okay, so now at this point I can again go ahead and write this to the reader in any configuration. By default, our readers they always have 2 configurations set. The PC Prox readers always have 2 configurations set. In this case with the 805, it's HID Prox, and it's a 758X equivalent reader type. This configuration reads the CSN from a smart card, just so you UID or CSN of the smart card. Okay, so we'll just put this in configuration 3. So we're going to use Deister UID. We're going to write this to the reader, remove the card. Okay, and now it's going to write the dice through UID to the reader. Now we can also save this, and I'm not going to do that right now, but we could save this to a config file. Okay, well, let's click it. You can give it a name. Defaults to the PCProx5 data files folder in the configuration utility folder. Okay, so this is in program files, x86, RF IDeas, PCProx folder. Okay, and then we can save that. So that file's been saved. At that point, we're done. So it's a great tool. If you've got a card, you don't know what it is, it'll determine what the technology is, and then you can go to the next step and actually configure the reader using the utility. So it's a great tool for configuring the reader, saving a configuration file. Okay. So we're going to exit the card analyzer. Always make sure to remove the card from the reader so it doesn't keystroke it. It will try to, as the reader power cycles, if a card is placed on it, it will keystroke into your operating system. So it may send some keystrokes that open applications as an example. So you want to ensure that you remove the card. So let's take a look and see. We should have dice through UID in configuration 3. And if we present the card to the reader, it should output the number displayed, 159479. Great. Okay, so it did what we wanted it to do. Now what we'll do is let's use, now that we've configured a reader. So we've configured a reader. We're outputting the correct card data. Now I need to configure, I have 3 readers attached to a 10-port hub. So what we're going to do is go into the cloning feature. Okay. And the cloning feature allows us to configure multiple readers at one time. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect. It's telling us to disconnect the reader. No readers on the bus. Okay, that's a good thing. Now I'm going to connect 3 readers. To do this, we have a 10-port. I have a 10-port powered hub that I use. You can configure, I'll say, up to 10 readers at a time. So it's really a great tool if you have quite a few readers to configure. Again, I recommend a 10-port powered hub with this. It's a great tool to use. And you'll see right now that it's going to go through and it's going to configure each of these readers. A couple things to talk about here. Write LUID. What's a LUID? LUID is a logical, call a logical unit ID that you can configure to the reader. It's a field that will give it a number, let you know that the reader's been configured. Doesn't have to be checked. You can go in though if it has a LUID, you can go in and look that it had been configured. And one thing I did, it's finished. Okay. And we'll close. And we've just configured our three readers. Okay. It was that simple. So you can do up to 10 on a powered hub. Okay. So we've used the card analyzer to configure the reader, to learn the card, to configure the reader. We've used the cloning tool to program other readers with that configuration. At that point, you're done. You should be able to deploy those readers to the field. Okay. I want to show you. We'll go back in. I want to show you some other features of the configuration utility. Okay, I want to leave us about 5 or 10 minutes of time at the end if you have any questions, so we'll run through this relatively quickly. Again, click connect. If the reader was connected before you opened the config utility, it would automatically connect. In my case, the utility was open. I connected the reader. I have to click connect. Okay, again, you'll see the model number of the reader displayed, firmware version, and the bit and PID of the reader. We'll go through some of these tabs. Well, let's look at this first configuration. The new readers have 4 configurations, so you can configure up to 4 different card types, or you could configure one card type with maybe 2 different formats. So we talked about formats earlier. Maybe the customer is using a 26-bit card and a 37-bit card. We can configure the reader to accommodate both of those, to output the correct card data for each of those formats. Okay, so 4 configurations. You can select any configuration. You have your card type list. Okay, so if I slide this up, you'll see off, and then you can select your different card types, and you'll see that the different card types. Okay, high priority by default configuration 1 is turned on. If you're using multiple card types, I probably recommend just turning this off and not using high priority. What it will do is it will look at that first card type first. It will look for this because that is the card type with the highest priority. In reality, I think if we're really using many different card types in a facility, I don't want it to delay necessarily on that first card type. I want any of those 2 or 4 card types to have equal value. Okay, so you can uncheck that or leave that checked. Again, if you're using multiple card types, I probably would uncheck this. Okay, your timing, really key press time, hold time, that is it will either speed up or slow down the keystrokes being output, right? So it would speed up that or slow down that keystroke process. There have been cases I know connected to some in the past, not as much today, where the keystrokes had to be slowed down for a particular MFP. Today, 20 milliseconds seems to be fine. Hasn't been an issue. Card hold time is set at 1 second. That's how long the data stays in the buffer before the next card can be read. Okay, shouldn't have to do anything on this tab at all when deploying our reader. The SDK tab, really, I'll say that be aware of here is the volume control. This new reader has you can turn the volume off, or you can set it to a low volume. If the printer was next to a cubicle, and of course that beeping bothers that person in that cubicle, you can make it lower, so at least when the card is presented to the reader, it's the user knows that the card has been read by the reader. Whenever you make a change in the config utility, make sure you click write active. Okay, that saves the configuration to the reader. Okay, so whenever a change is made, remember to write active. Now you can go through and make a lot of changes, and then just at the end of making all those changes, remember to click write active. So you can go through these different tabs. You could change a setting here. You could change a setting. You can go into and change the volume. Once you've made all those changes, you can then click write active. Just make sure that you click write active at the end. Okay, so you can lower the volume. You can turn the volume off. That will turn the beeper off completely. Sometimes, especially in healthcare in the hospitals, they don't want it to beep at all. Okay, so in that case, the LED is the only indication that the card has been read. The LED will change from red to green. Okay. The format tab. Really, the format tab. is where your configuration's done, and Michal talked about that earlier, changing it from decimal to hex, right? So as an example, we're outputting that card ID as a decimal value right now, okay? We can simply go in and send ID as hexadecimal, write that value, and now that is the hexadecimal value. If we click the auto get ID, I use the auto get ID as a tool. That's not going to show us the right value, but it will show us a value, okay, and actually there it is right there, 6850. It's the last 2 bytes of data. 13 is probably the facility code, okay. So this is part of the formatting, right? We looked at the raw data and the formatting. We're now outputting that ID field, those bits. We saw in that 37-bit, on that 37-bit format where we had 19 bits of data. Here we're only taking 16 bits of data, okay? 16 bits. That makes up the card ID. Many different things we can do. We can reverse bits, we can reverse bytes. We can only read cards with certain bit counts. I had a customer recently that wanted to only read cards with 32 bits, okay, because apparently there were a mixture of other cards in their population, and they didn't want that data being sent to their application. So you can limit the bit count, okay. We can display hexadecimal, either uppercase or lowercase, okay. The use numeric keypad, in those cases, let's say a French keyboard, right? If you're using a French keyboard, this data would end up with the characters of the keys in that same row. So we might want to use the numeric keypad, okay? So it's outputting the correct numeric values, okay? Can also do the Azerty shift lock, okay? So if it's outputting those characters from that keyboard, we can use numeric keypad. So this is another good feature to be aware of, okay? I want to show you how to set the reader actually to raw data. So this is default in this case for HID procs, okay? So if I wanted to look at that raw, remember we talked about the raw data, the PAX data from the card. And we want to utilize just a unique number. So I can go in and uncheck send ID. So now we're not using the 16 bits of ID. I'm going to use more bits. And I'm not stripping any bits. So here we're stripping 1 leading bit and 1 trailing bit from that raw data. So now I'm not going to strip anything. No bits are going to be stripped. I'm going to write this. And you'll see, and let's change it to hex. We'll make one more change just so you can see. And we want it as hexadecimal. Now you'll see we're reading 26 bits of data, which this card is. It's a 26-bit card. And you can see this is the hexadecimal representation of that 26 bits, okay? And we're keystroking the hexadecimal value for that, okay? If I wanted to go back and change it to decimal, uncheck send ID as hex, right, and now we'll output the decimal representation, okay? So you can, as Michal mentioned earlier, decimal to hexadecimal or vice versa, okay? So couple things there I wanted you to be aware of. You'll see a couple other tabs here, secure and the BTLE secure. If we have a new reader that supports the DesFire secure memory, okay, so if we had that compatible reader, this tab would be active and we could fill in that information that we talked about earlier. You would need the key, right? The key to access that particular area of the card, that application, in this case it's DesFire, the application, the file name, where the data is at in that file, okay? So we can configure that MyFair DesFire reader with this particular tab. So it goes back to having all that information, ensuring we have all that information from the customer on those when dealing with secure memory cards, smart cards. Okay, BTLE, this is just basically for turning the radio on and off of our BLE reader. Okay, so these are the tabs. Primarily, when you're working with the utility, you'll really work with the card analyzer, the cloning, okay, or again the format tab, format or SDK, changing the volume. Okay, so these would be the tabs that you would use, and then again, maybe selecting the card type. If you didn't use the card analyzer, you knew the card type, you could just go in and select the card type. Okay. So and then recap of the analyzer. Again, going into the learned card. Again, it's compatible with the PC Prox Plus readers. We go in and we learn the card. It gives us the card type, the supported readers. Here, if the value of the selected card type is correct, you could simply stop here, select your configuration. You can write it, and then you can save it to a configuration file. Or if it wasn't, you can go in and input the value required for the given card type, analyze, and go ahead and configure, again, write the configuration to the reader. Okay, so again, Card Analyzer is a great tool for configuring, analyzing the card, configuring the reader. And here it's just showing us that we were successful. Okay. So it was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Michal hopefully answered some questions that you had regarding setup of the reader in the Secure Print, MyQ Secure Print. Gave you a brief overview of the credentials, the configuration utility, and the analyzer.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff and Michal, for your great presentations, and very nice to see the live demos as well. We hope to have shown you all some tips and some tricks really to aid the sale and the installation of your RFID readers on MyQ software and on all the different MFDs. So as you saw, the PC Prox Plus is actually a very comprehensive reader. It's got a lot of great tools built in which can help you determine what card the customer's reading. You can do that live if you take a PC Prox into customer meetings. It will help you configure the cards, and there's even tools to actually deploy quickly with the cloning feature, rather than having to individually set up each credential on the reader. So lots of tools there to be used. Obviously, we're fully integrated with MyQ. You saw from Michal's video how easy it is to set up the credential ID on the software. So we're really available worldwide. We've been leading the marketplace for over 24 years, deployed worldwide. We've been working together with MyQ for many years, so there's a very strong, deep partnership with many case studies and many deployments already in place. So with that, let's look at a couple of questions. We've only really got a minute or so, but one question that came in was, when should I use single technology versus multi-technology readers? And I can answer that one. It's really a question of longevity. The single technology reader is a little bit more cost effective, but we often see our readers are deployed with MyQ over 2 generations of MFD tenders. So typically 3-4 year lease is up, they get renewed, possibly with the same MFD, maybe a new one, but they'll take the reader and the MyQ software onto those new machines. So if you deploy a multi-technology, you're going to have access to many more cards, and if that customer upgrades their credentials, which is very likely given that most companies want to sort of secure their access and their systems and their networks, So an upgrade from a 125 card to a more secure card could happen over that 8-year span. So therefore we recommend the PC Prox Plus, the multi-frequency, because it's got upwards of 80, 90 different technologies there, and that's going to give you much more longevity over those years. Another question is, when should I use BLE? And we have BLE available in our readers as well. There's many applications, positioning, asset tracking in hospitals, in banks, people that is using BLE. And we're also seeing new credentials, mobile credentials coming out on your cell phone which connect through BLE. So look out for those opportunities, and really feel free to involve us and the MyQ team. Reach out to anyone on this slide, and we'll be happy to support you through any secure credential opportunities, any BLE opportunities, or any other requirement from your customers. I think that's most of the questions that have come in. So I would just like to thank everyone again for joining. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to join us. This webinar and the previous one will be available on the MyQ website shortly. And we thank you very much and look forward to talking and meeting again in the near future. Thank you. Goodbye.